Greek furniture tends to be a really difficult subject because while it's incredibly influential to the rest of the Western world, really from the ancient Greeks all the way forward, we don't have a lot of it. And there are a few things that I want to bring to your attention before we really get into the subject of Greek furniture. First of all, we have a climate issue. In ancient Egypt, they were in a desert, so if you build something out of wood, it has a pretty good chance of surviving as long as it's buried or otherwise properly preserved. Whereas Greece has a very different climate. It's wet, wood tends to rot, so we don't have as many original pieces. We also have the issue of trade. Now, oftentimes we think of, for example, the Egyptians, the Assyrians, the Hittites, the Greeks as all being independent and not really dealing with one another unless they're at war. But in fact, as we talked about with the Egyptians, there are massive trade routes running throughout the Eastern Mediterranean at the time. The Greeks are well aware of what the Egyptians are doing. In fact, they will be heavily influenced by the Egyptians, especially early on in the 8th and 7th centuries BCE. They're also well aware of what the Hittites in Turkey, modern-day Turkey, are doing. They're well aware of the Etruscans in Italy and other groups. Consequently, they will actually start their civilization, start their artwork based very much on the Egyptians. Here on the left, we see an Egyptian sculpture. You can tell from the body form, but also from the clothing that this is Egyptian. And on the right, we have an archaic Greek sculpture. And you can see those similarities. The hands are in the same position. The body form is very, very similar. The Greek is nude as opposed to the Egyptians. That's a difference in modesty, but not that big of a deal. The Greeks will do the same with architecture and almost every other artistic form. It gives them some credibility as well as a starting point, dealing with a much older, much more developed civilization to kind of give them that jumping off point to create their own form. After all artwork is based on the work of previous generations. All artists stand on the shoulders of giants. Now, what we do have is artwork, and artwork can reveal the forms of Greek furniture. We often see this in vase painting, but we also see it in frescoes, in tombs, and other places, where we would see the form of, for example, a chair, a stool, or a bed. And these are going to be really important because a lot of times the Greeks are pretty realistic in their depictions of these scenes. These are often genre scenes or domestic scenes, as we see here, where we see someone teaching, we see musicians, we see musical instruments, chairs, stools, all sorts of things in fairly realistic detail. This has allowed for the revival of a lot of Greek forms because we can go back and see exactly what they look like. Now, we could have done that with the Egyptians as well, but to a much lesser extent. They aren't depicting the furniture and art nearly as much as the Greeks will.